Welcome into this Five Clubs conversation. I'm Gary Williams. This week, it's not going to be about golf. And one of the great things about kind of having your own platform, as my partners are cringing on, really, it's yours? No, it isn't. But I do have the discretion and the autonomy to have conversations that may be a little bit different. And that's what today is going to be about, because I've not talked a great deal about this, did to some degree with Willie Wilcox, to a lesser degree when Billy Horschel was on, because his wife is on a journey of sobriety with her own alcoholism. I'm an alcoholic, and there are people that have a public forum that have made the choice, and it's everybody's choice to talk about their own journey, whatever that journey might be. Well, the gentleman who's going to be joining me is somebody who was a sensational college athlete and was somebody projected to be a sensational professional athlete, and it didn't happen, to the degree that he is widely regarded as somebody who is one of the biggest busts in professional sports histories, and he owns it. That person is Ryan Leaf, and Ryan is somebody who, after his professional career ended in the National Football League, struggled for years, and then found himself in the throes of a drug addiction that found him in jail for more than 1 year. And since then, he's found his footing, and he's found sobriety, and he's got a job, and that job includes talking about the sport that made him famous and then infamous, and that is through PointsBet. He's talking about lines, and he's talking about college football and the NFL. Today is not going to be about that. Today is going to be about trying to be where your feet are and living a life that includes accountability and acceptance and surrender and all the things that are associated with people who have addiction, like I do and like he does. So I hope you're interested in this, because there may be somebody in your life directly. Who knows? I hope it's not you, but if it is, I hope you listen closely, because for years, I didn't listen. I didn't listen to myself, and I didn't listen to other people who told me that I had a problem. And I've addressed that problem, but you know what? I've got to address it every single day. He's been doing it, and he's provided me with some inspiration. So Ryan Leaf joining us on this Five Clubs conversation. And with that, we welcome in the aforementioned Ryan Leaf. Ryan, how you feeling?
I'm doing real well. Good to talk to you, Gary.
Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. You know, as somebody who spends his life, knee deep in golf like you do, spending your life knee deep, primarily the NFL, college football, and it's great to see your new set, your new studio. Very happy for you. When did you guys, by the way, when did you launch to have that studio presentation? How new is that?
Yesterday, we launched from this studio. We've
Wow.
been filming out of the Good Morning Football studio for the first month of the show, and this opened yesterday. And this couch is unbelievably comfortable. It makes it for a very relaxed atmosphere to do my show from. And yeah, I'm really blessed. The Leaf family is incredibly grateful for where we are. I mean, just 10 years ago, I was sitting in a prison cell. You would have never told me that anything like this was possible at all. I had no, I would have told you were insane if you said that was the case. Yeah, it's again, I'd mentioned in the open, about how this was going to be a departure. And I've talked modestly about my own struggles with alcohol. It cost me a job that was a dream job a couple of years ago. And trying to, be where my feet are and live a life of sobriety. And it's a great feeling to wake up feeling that. But the scary thing is that, you know what? I know that my mind can drift and that I can't believe everything that I think. Like I'm fine and I'm good and I got this. I never have it. It's today. And I got to think about tomorrow. I want to go back because you mentioned the Leaf family is blessed. In reading some things, and I've followed your career going obviously all the way back to Washington State, you said, look, this is not a byproduct of not having a great upbringing. The things that, you got yourself into, you had great parents, great siblings, grandparents.
Is that something that you have incredible gratitude for now more than you've ever felt in your life, the family that you're a product of?
Yeah, and especially since I have a family of my own now too, right? I think that's because, people disappeared when my life got complicated, right? When I started but the ones that didn't are the ones that I truly know unconditionally love me. They loved me when I was a star football player. They loved me when I was a junkie felon in a jail cell, right? So those are the people that I'm rolling with. They're who I'm riding with. And luckily for me, I found one in a partner and the mother of my child who's been, ride or die for me on that end of things too. And then, my little man, he's just along for the ride. He doesn't ever have to see that version that I think a lot of other people had to see, years ago. And that's maybe one of the coolest things in the world. Yesterday was his 5th birthday, and it was so fun to celebrate with that guy and see how much he's grown in just the 5 years he's been around.
Ryan, how often do you pause and think, never in my life did I think at the age that you are, that you'd be living in suburban Connecticut, working in Midtown Manhattan as a gas bag, and I say that affectionately because that's what I am, talking about something obviously that you love. How often do you pause and think about that?
Every night when I lay my head down, I put together a gratitude list. And so every night is when I pause and I think about it. I mean, some things are different. Like, I'm really grateful for my bed. I think, the mattress that I have is incredibly comfortable. And I think a lot of people, don't quite understand that. But when you slept on a cement slab for 3 years almost, like, the comfort of your bed is something you don't take for granted anymore. And I think the perspective that I've gained has allowed me every night to be able to have that gratitude list, because I understand the little things that I think a lot of other people take for granted because of what I have gone through. And it's a blessing. It really is. I never thought I'd be able to look at anybody or tell anybody that I was grateful for having spent 32 months in prison. I mean, I don't recommend it at all, but I'm really grateful for it.
The thing that you just mentioned, it's interesting. All the people in my life who know me best, who love me the most, can't understand the way that my mind operates as somebody who is, in addiction and will never get past that. And I will always, some people can say, well, I'm recovered. Semantics to me, recovered, recovering. And yet when I hear things and read things that you've said and the words that you just spoke, it's like, I get him. And never in my life did I think that I would walk into rooms or listen to other people that I have nothing in common with, but the greatest commonality is the thing that keeps me right every day. When was the first time you heard somebody that you looked at and you went, this person, there's no way we will have anything in common? And then they said something, you went, oh my God, I think that way, yeah. I feel that way.
First time I stepped into treatment, sat across from a young man who had grown up, most of his life, homeless on the streets, was an incredibly talented artist, had like a memory that he could memorize anything. And he had spent time in prison, and I hadn't at that point. I needed a few more years before I got to that. But I looked across and I'm like, that's my story. I mean, what he's saying is my story. It's just, it just looks a little different. It's shaped a little different, and that's it. I am, as far as I wanted to make my story more, more flashy or something like that, I was still the same guy. I was this junkie who would do anything to, curb his addiction, just like he would, and feed it. And so, yeah, I get your point. Like, when I walk in those rooms and I sit in those rooms, I hear my story being told over and over and over again.
One of the things about your upbringing that you've pointed out repeatedly is that, you looked at people who were drug users and maybe drank to excess with alcohol as that there was some amorality to their conduct. You were the guy who showed up with a 6-pack of 7-Up, which is a great brand to use because it's very nostalgic. You can't even find it if you want to anymore. But you said something, I'm like, God, that's it. You're like, I was a drug addict before I even used a drug. Explain that if you would, because some people are going, that doesn't make any sense.
So competition was my first drug of choice. I had to compete at everything. Like that's what fueled me. And I wanted to beat your tail inside and out. And if I were to happen to lose, I wanted to run it back immediately, whether we were on the football field, the baseball diamond, or the basketball court, golf, ping pong, didn't matter, right? I was going to compete. And so, and it didn't, and I behaved as such, right? Now that I know how an addict behaves and how I behaved, that's how I behaved as an athlete. And I'm not saying it was the wrong thing because it got me to where I needed to get. There's a fine line, right? That you just kind of sway back and forth on. But that was my drug of choice. And I fed it constantly until it no longer existed. And then I didn't have that to feed it anymore. And I found another way to medicate it. And that was the form of an opiate painkiller.
You know, the story of you being incarcerated and somebody, begrudgingly having you go down and help other inmates learn how to read, and you were like, God, really? This is where I am, and this is what I'm going to do. But there was something that touched you, like never in my life have I served somebody else. Have I been selfless in terms of not going like, what am I getting out of it? Like what I'm giving something, I got to get something here. But you knew in that particular, like really Spartan moment, like, I got to do this again. And when this is over, when I leave here, that has to be a part of my foundation. Explain why that impacted you in that way.
Well, I don't think at the time that I didn't understand it then. I just, for whatever reason, I've had many of those moments, those kind of come to Jesus moments where people were trying to help me, mentors, family, coaches. And I can't tell you why I acquiesced and I went down to the prison library and helped those prisoners who didn't know how to read, learn how to read. I think it was in part the guy who was asking me. He was a, two-tour Vietnam, or not Vietnam, but Afghanistan and Iraq war veteran. And he had tried to better himself every single day he was in there. But I remember walking down the hallway thinking, this is silly, this is stupid, this isn't going to help me, and doesn't he know how important I am? The irony in that the guy in a red jumpsuit walking down a prison hallway still thinks he's important, I think is the entire problem. So I didn't know it immediately, not that first day. I didn't know it a week later. I didn't know it a month later. But after a few months of showing up, I found that I was sleeping better. I was more personable. I was talking to my family. And that's when I came to the realization that I was being of service to another human being for the first time in my life. I used to think what I did on Saturdays and Sundays was me being of service. And it's, of course, that's asinine. And so I knew that was going to have to be at the foundation of who I was when I got out, or like nothing would change. It no longer could be about me. It had to be about somebody else. And what's crazy about that, Gary, is that when you make it about somebody else, like your life gets better. And I just assumed that to make your life better, you had to be all encompassing and totally consumed with yourself and how that would work. So yeah, that changed perspective greatly. And I still struggle with that. I still think I have plenty of narcissistic personality disorders that exist when I think it has to be about me. But luckily I have people around me who hold me accountable, and I understand it. I'm more self-aware for sure.
I was having a conversation this morning with some people who obviously know me well, and I'm talking about who were also in addiction, and they were like, and I was sharing that I was going to talk to you this afternoon, and they're like, why are you going to do that? And I said, because I want to, because he's an inspiration. He is.
What did you say to him when they said, why would you talk to him?
Not you specifically, just the conversation was about anonymity. The conversation was about how sacred and private, everybody's journey is. And I said, look, I have to protect your anonymity. It's my decision to be transparent to whatever degree that I want to be. And it was not a contentious conversation, but it was like, and it gets back to what you were just talking about. Like, I need to make sure that I do things that I'm not trying to serve myself, because
Right.
I believe me, people can look at me and go, how could you have a big ego? Look, I do. And the alcohol wasn't the problem. I'm the problem. The
Yep.
problem is managing, the things that I want for myself, and how, there's a great book by an author named Ryan Holiday called Ego is the Enemy.
Oh yeah, read it.
Yeah, I'm
Big
sure.
time. Yeah.
I'm sure you have. And that is, it's like, what is in it for me? And that stuff gets in my way all the time.
Yeah, I've had some people in my fellowship, talk to me about that too, and I'm like, this has nothing to do with any of you, right? This has everything to do with me and for the individual that still struggles. My story is very public. Like I can't run and hide from that.
No
Like
question.
everybody knows it. So I also wanted to be able to use my story as a way for me to be accountable for my actions. I think for the longest time, and I know for a fact that I was never accountable to anybody or anything, and I think people wanted that. They wanted some accountability on my part, because regardless of what happened anywhere at any time, what was my part in it? And I think that's important piece, especially if you're going to talk about your recovery. You have to be transparent, you have to be vulnerable, and you have to be able to be accountable for everything that you've done.
I couldn't agree more. One of the things that, and I'm curious with you, because our addictions, and again, I've got an addictive personality. It was alcohol. With you is opioids. I spent years trying to make myself believe that I could stop on my own, that I could, read these books, and it's willpower, and you can do this. When you put your mind to other things, you've been able to do it. One of the things that took years for me was to surrender to the fact that I just, this drug owns me. I can't, in order to win, I gotta concede, like you own me, but you're not going to kill me.
Well, I wasn't I wanted it to kill me. So that's where you and I differed on that end of things. I was begging for death at the end there. Luckily for me, the sheriff's department showed up and saved my life. Right. Yeah. I needed to be intervened with. I couldn't do it on my own. And even then, like it took forever for me, about 26 of the 32 months while I was inside, to finally find that acceptance and that surrender you're talking about. It just, I needed to be humbled in a way that others simply didn't have to be. And that was my journey. That's the way it had to go for me. And it was embarrassing. It was humiliating. And it was, incredibly difficult for my family. So I have a lot of amends to make up for all the damage that I've done. And in a lot of situations, probably never be able to make enough amends for some.
As do I, for sure. And it's you used a word that, I have here on this little sheet, and it's not questions, it's just words. And acceptance is one of those words. And accepting, the damage that I've done, and accepting the responsibility that comes with every day doing the things I like. One of the biggest challenges, Ryan, that I have had, and I'm curious for you with a family that's been as supportive as yours have been, and I'm sure their patience was tested at times, and their trust and their belief, is this idea that I get to certain places in my sobriety where I'm like, why are they not feeling as good as I am? Like why aren't they looking at me like I want them to look at me? And again, it gets partially back to ego. And I've got to accept the fact that everybody's recovery, because I gave my family PTSD. There's no question in my mind that the damage I did is something that will take years for them to get over. And like you said, they may never do it. Has that been challenging for you? And has it been challenging for you to think, God, I'm moving along here. Why is everybody else moving at a slower pace?
At first it was. And then I've come to accept and understand that some people in my life experienced the absolute worst possible version of me for such a long period of time. It may never, course correct. It may never happen. And I have to have acceptance around that and understand that it may not be something that will ever change. And so I have to accept that. I have to understand that what other people ultimately think about me is none of my business anymore, right? I do my part. I control what I can control, and that's a daily thing, especially when you do a public thing like you and I do, right?
Yeah.
We're constantly criticized. Your past is always thrown in your face. And so I have to be, because I'll get 1,000 compliments of where I'm at and where I'm going, but there'll be one negative one, and that's the one I'll stew on, right?
No doubt.
It's human nature, and I have to be better at understanding that and just discarding resentments that exist.
How about judgment? Because you're in a position now, and even if you're just trying to be as clinical in your analysis as you want to be, people go, God, look at you. Like, look at you being critical of this guy or that guy. Forget whether it's the anonymous saying that. How about the way you're trying to manage that in terms of the intellectual part of being in the job that you're in? It's an inherent responsibility to analyze, but a lot of people look at that, he's judging.
Yeah. It's again, what other people think of me is none of my business. I'm doing a job, right? My job is to analyze what's going on the football field. And what I can really bring to the table and make it relatable is my experience, right? When I see something going on that I did either the right way or the wrong way, I can relate to that. And I think that's given me a different perspective, one that's unique. And it's a reason why I have the job that I have now is because my perspective is a lot different from a lot of the people that have played the game, gone through the things they've gone through, and the life we've led. So I'm okay with it. I commit. I do my job. That's what I'm asked to do. I leave it at the door when I walk home. I'm not worried about what other people think in terms of why would we listen to Ryan Leaf about this? Boy, he sure seems judgmental for somebody who has such a checkered past. And I'm like, the only difference is, like anybody else, I'm a flawed human being trying to be better every single day. I'm just not going to allow my past define me moving forward, right? It's my past. I can't do anything about it, right? I can try to be better every single day. I don't know what 10 years are going to look like from now. I don't know what tomorrow is going to look like. I assume if I do the same thing I did today and be grateful and meditate and pray and go to meetings and do the things that I need to do, that I'll be able to lay my head down tomorrow night in the same fashion. But I don't count my chickens by any means, right? Today is today, and that's all I'm worried about.
Yeah, you used the term talking about not shutting the door on the past. Again, something that I've had conversations with people who are invested in me from a loving standpoint. And I had one about 2 months ago with somebody who has lived a life of sobriety for more than 3 decades. And I said, I struggle at times because I don't want us to shut the door on the past nor wish to forget it. He's like, you got to get over that. I'm like, this is the human condition. I can't get over it. It's there. It's there. I'm not saying that I'm wallowing in this on a day-to-day basis, but I want to use it to be constructive. I don't want to forget the judgments that I made, the decisions that I made, and the lack of accountability that I had in myself. And that's something that when I talk to people who are outside the program, they're like, I don't get it. I don't get it. You can't change the past. I'm like, no, exactly. I can't, but I've got to constructively try to learn from it. I appreciate the fact that you brought it up because like you, all I can do is try to be as good as I can be right now. And that's something, Ryan, that for years, I was so caught up, and again, our everybody's path is different. I was trying to cover up the con from yesterday, figure out how I was going to get through the con today, and feeling so shitty in a combination of being hammered and just morally and emotionally bankrupt that how am I going to even do this tomorrow? But then I'd wake up and it would be like, how am I going to cover up yesterday? How do I get through today? And that was exhausting.
So I recently tried to help a friend of mine, and I got him into a treatment facility, and I was just informed that he got kicked out. And so I messaged him and, I said, hey, consequences are a bitch, but you control what you can control. And then I got this this long ass text message of just playing the victim and blaming and taking zero accountability. And I was just like, that message is the exact message I would have sent 10 years ago. I mean, exact. It would have been all about everybody else, nothing that I did. And so I get it. Yeah, I get it. And it's awesome. It's a good reminder. It's a reminder to see it. It holds a mirror up to you and go, oh yeah, that was me. You cannot ever think for one moment that this has not anything to do with you anymore, right? It's always got to do with you and how you react and how you deal with it. Like, life isn't fair. It's how you deal with it that matters, period. That's the best information that I could give anybody around recovery. When
you got your mind right and you started to feel like you were finding encouragement in the things that you were doing and thinking, as far as like sleeping, did you not sleep well for years?
Well, no, because when you take opioids, the sedative aspect of it, it becomes.
But it's not quality sleep, though.
It becomes a stimulant. I'd be up all night.
Oh,
right. It has a reverse effect. So no, I had terrible. I sleep so well now. I am out, and you cannot. I lived in Los Angeles for the last 7 years, and we had many earthquakes, and earthquakes wouldn't wake me up unless my wife was like, just like elbowing the hell out of my side to wake me up and get us into a safe space. Yeah, I sleep really well. I sleep like the dead right now.
One of the things that I'm curious as far as shame, feeling shame, and back to the idea of acceptance. The greatest thing that ever happened to me was being an alcoholic, and that sounds just counterintuitive to anything anybody. But the fact is, I can say that, which means that I've gotten the help that I absolutely needed, and it's allowed me for today to do the right things. And I know you talk about do the next right thing, and all I did was the next wrong thing, habitually. And so I'm not ashamed. And that's the thing about being transparent. I was so wrapped up in a just a cloak of lies that as soon as I was unburdened by, hey, look, I give up. I am who I am. I am an alcoholic. I need help. My wife would be like, shh, come, like they might hear you. I don't give a shit if they hear me. I can't live this way anymore. And I'm not ashamed. Did you have, and believe me, I had long stretches of feeling a great deal of shame, and I don't now. Was that something you had to come through the vortex of?
Yeah, well, I fully had to understand what shame and guilt was, right? Yeah. Shame is you believe you're a bad person. Whereas guilt is you understand you did a bad thing. You're not inherently bad. You aren't you did a bad thing. You are not a bad person. And I think for the longest time, I just believed I was a piece of shit because everybody told me I was. And so therefore it must be true. And so that's where the shame came in. So yeah, now when I hear that type of thing, I'm not ashamed of my past. It's given me the life that I have now. And I don't know if I've ever would have been able to get to that place in my life. I've been super successful, and that ego would have stayed, running rampant like it had since I was a little kid. So the humbling that came with it, I don't recommend it, like I said before, but I'm incredibly grateful for it. I'm not ashamed. In fact, the anonymity aspect of things, it may be the proudest thing I am of anything is getting sober. And I want that, and I want to wear it as a badge of honor. I don't care who knows, and I think it takes people by surprise a lot of the times in conversations where it almost seems like probably oversharing to some. But, in just casual conversation, I'll bring up like, when I got out of prison, and there'll be a double take like, don't let people know you were in prison, first of all. And I'm like, really? I mean, I think it's pretty interesting story is the way I view it now. Like, I mean, everybody's got unique qualifiers in their stories their entire life. Mine certainly has some unique qualifiers that make for an interesting dialogue. That's for sure.
No, it's, when I was in treatment, there was a documentary that was shown, and I found it to be a little bit curious because everyone was trying to get their mind right, and they're in there for all various things, and their lives are upside down. It was a documentary called Anonymous People. And it was about kind of the recovery community and how in the early 70s, a lot of people like yourself who have, were very, very famous, came forward and said that I'm not going to be shamed by this. This is who we are, and we need help. And so do a lot of other people. And they feel a stigma that is preventing them from getting the help and so on and so forth. But I bring that up because you've made the choice to speak to a lot of people who need help, people who are in the throes of whether it's right out of detox. I mean, you're going back into the belly of the beast on a pretty regular basis, I would assume, to talk to people whose lives are in total wreckage. How constructive is that in those experiences for you?
Well, it's important. One, as a reminder of what's out there for me if I don't continue down this path. I think that's a really important piece in all of this. But also I want them to know, like, there is a solution. Like, I think they just assume that because I was a famous rich football player back in the day, that when I walked out of prison, like, everything was laid out for me. I mean, there was nothing there, right? I had no money. I had no hope. I had no job opportunities. Like, I work for the Disney Corporation now and I call games for ESPN. Like, Mickey Mouse wasn't waiting there like, hey, Ryan, come work for me. I mean, it wasn't, there was nothing there. And luckily for me, I had my parents' couch that I could sleep on. And a lot of guys that get out of prison, people that get out of prison, don't even have that. So I think it's important for them to understand, like, you can have this life. Like, the promises can come true for you, but you have to be willing to do whatever it takes to stay sober. And so when I talk to a lot of them, I ask them that question. I said, what are you willing to do to stay sober? And before they can even say anything, I said, unless you tell me anything, there really isn't much I can do
for
you. So if you're not willing to do anything that somebody suggests to do to try to stay sober, then I don't have any answers for you, because that's how I got sober. I went to a sponsor who showed me the path. I went to a bunch of different people who had lives that I wanted, and I followed their advice verbatim. Because guess what? My best thinking took me to a prison cell. I do not make the right choices. I need help with that. And I understand that. And that was a very hard thing to say too, because I've been incredibly successful in my life. I can do this on my own. I don't need help from anybody else. No, clearly I need help because my best thinking took me to a prison cell. So that's the way you got to look at it.
The whole thing about what are your priorities, and some of the constructive things that I had to learn this because, I've got friends who I know are I can see it, that they're struggling. And it's like, people are like, well, you've gone through this, you're going through this, why don't you help? And I'm like, I'll do everything I can, but addiction is self-diagnosis. If you or I do not accept it first before anybody else, like, somebody could scream at me all day long. If I'm not ready to put sobriety before everything else in my life, there is nothing else that's going to exist. And Ryan, I got to be honest, I was given, like, it was like a weekly, exercise of what are the most important things in your life. And I would, I'd be like, oh, put family first. It's always going to be the right answer. I'd put everything but sobriety. And then, I don't know how many months it was, but it's like, you don't get it. None of this other stuff exists unless that is first. And I try
to help people all the time. And, after I hear a little bit of their story and they're asking for some advice, I say, well, you need to go to treatment.
Yeah.
And they're just like, no, I can't. I'll lose my family. I'll lose my job. And I'm like, you're going to lose those things anyway. It's just, it may be the long game. You just, it may take a couple years for you to lose them, but you're going to lose them regardless. So, I had to lose everything myself. I didn't listen when people said, hey, and showed me the mirror, right? To your point, if I would have gotten sober when everybody else in my life wanted me to get sober, it would have been, 15 years ago. It wouldn't have been, having to go to jail and experiencing all the humiliation and embarrassment, being dragged across the newspapers and in front of the cameras, that you don't get sober on other people's time frame. It just doesn't happen that way.
I saw yesterday where CC Sabathia posted on his Twitter account 7 years of living a sober life, and like you, this is this was at the end of the regular season going into the postseason for the Yankees, and this was before I was willing to get help, and I'm going, seriously, he can't wait until after the postseason. And I'm a lifelong Yankee fan, and I'm going, seriously, this guy's getting paid X, and he can't wait 3 weeks to give them 3 starts in the postseason. That's not the way it works. He's not waiting for the postseason to be over. He knew he needed help, and 7 years later, he's posting that 7 years of sobriety. And Ryan, I can just think about where my mind was as a fan, and I listen to all the other fans going, how can you do this? You're getting paid X.
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with
no
money. I mean, you can be the richest person in the world, and if you can't function, right, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You never get to enjoy the spoils of that. So you got to give him a ton of credit. He's a client of my agents as well, and we had a run-in with one another a couple years back, and I think that when people talk about recognizing game, it's always around the athletic aspect of things. But when we walked up to each other, like we had never met before, but we had this thing in common that made us like blood brothers. And so, I'm really impressed with CC and how he's, upfront and honest about everything and the way he went about his business. I mean, I think there was a lot of people that helped get him to that place, of course. But for him to make that choice in the most difficult of situations in such a public way, he's quite an inspiration to me and many others.
I can sneak in a little bit of a golf angle here. You were mentioning before we got started that golf was a good outlet for you when you were trying to get your mind right. How?
Well, when I spent 32 months in prison, I only went outside twice in those 32 months. So the outdoors, nature was a huge part of my higher power.
Yep.
Because I wasn't, I'm not big into a omnipotent being. I'm more into the group of drunks mentality and nature as a higher power, because there's something so much greater than me out there. And that was something I could rely on. And so being out in nature in some of the world's best golf courses in Los Angeles, Riviera, LA Country Club, Lakeside, those places, to spend 4 or 5 hours fellowshipping with some buddies and being in nature and competing at something that I love to do. It was really important to me. And I remember when I went to pay for the membership, it was like I was living paycheck to paycheck. Like I had to put things on a credit card, but I knew that was like, when you invest in yourself and certain things, like the importance of that stuff is hugely important. And sure enough, it's something that gave me a lot of insight and really developed some great relationships through that process.
I'm similar to you, and I found myself, and unlike you, is when you were incarcerated in this treatment facility. There's a beautiful place, Northern Maryland, right on the Chesapeake Bay, and I was despondent when I got there. But with every passing day, I noticed more and more. I noticed deer. I noticed an eagle's nest. I noticed, these sunrises and these sunsets, and it started to impact me, which made me believe that, there was some light inside of me. And one of the reasons why is that I was allowing my mind to get quiet, and my mind was drifting towards things that were important to me. And you mentioned meditation. Is that something you do every day?
I try to. And now that I'm living on the East Coast, I have to take a train and commute for about an hour and a half on most days. And what's really cool in a train car, when things are kind of hustling and bustling, to just become still for a period of time, that's really helpful in how I'm getting centered. So yeah, it's been a huge part of being in that place where you talked about, being where your feet are, right? Being present, and not thinking ahead or this, that, and the other. Because my life right now it's pretty overwhelming, right? This show, my family, I'm traveling on the weekends, calling college football games. So it's a full go deal right now. And it's imperative that I have that moment where I can find that stillness and just kind of be where I'm at. It's a huge part of my program. Yes.
Yeah, you probably read it, another Ryan Holiday book, Stillness is the Key. And it's about, it gives some great historical references about, the importance of solitude and getting your mind quiet. And inherently, it's been clinically proven when your mind does get quiet, it does gravitate toward things that matter to you. And nothing else mattered to me when my mind was not right, other than satisfying myself, which was being impaired. And I highly recommend that book, as well as, the Ego is the Enemy, Obstacle is the Way. Ryan's written some great stuff. I know you've got a show to do, but I want you to give me some detail. I know the show, but I want you to share what you're doing now, because you mentioned the college football on the weekends, but this new platform, this is you. This is not about you calling games and the show is on the field. You're the show.
Yeah. What really, was the catalyst for this, and I have to give a ton of credit to, a friend of mine, Rich Eisen.
Yep.
He has been doing his own show for some time, and about just over 2 years ago, he started having me come on as a guest host when he was out. And I can't tell you how much that platform catapulted me into the position that I'm in. Not only because it got to showcase my ability to host my own show for 3 hours, but also for people to see the personality and the growth of a fellow human being. And people were interested in that, and they wanted to hear that. And I really think it allowed for my bosses here at PointsBet to, establish a show of my own. We named it The Straight Line. We thought that was a really neat play on words, a little play on words, because we're dealing with the gambling aspect and sports betting aspect, but the straight aspect of, staying on the straight and narrow, and the only way to be successful and have the things that I've found to have is being that way. So yeah, I'm really, really proud of it. I can't believe my boss, Liam, came to me with this idea of this studio, what it was going to look like, and to walk into it yesterday and to be sitting here right now. It is an unbelievable dream realized. And so, yeah, I like what I get to do. It gives me an opportunity to reach a lot of people. And I think it's a platform that showcases, for those of you who are out there who are still struggling, there is a solution. There is a way. And you can be exactly wherever you want to be, because 10 years ago, I was sitting in a prison cell, and I would have never imagined, if you would have told me that this was possible for me, I would have told you you're nuts. And look where we're at now. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity.
Let me get you out of here, because you got a show to do. These 5 quick questions. Who's the best college football player you've ever seen?
Reggie Bush.
Okay. I say Bo Jackson. Now, you were like 10 years old when Bo was at Auburn.
Well, I tell you what, though, Bo Jackson was all over my brother. My brother Jeff's here visiting me today.
Yeah.
He had everything Bo Jackson in his room. So I get that one too.
Yeah.
I didn't get to see him enough in college. Reggie Bush for me was the best college football player I'd ever seen.
He was spectacular, no doubt. The last time you threw a football with velocity?
Spring game, I was covering the Washington State game. Coach Dickert wheeled me out there and had me throw a couple passes in the scrimmage, and I fired a couple to the sideline there. So that was probably the last time I let one fly.
All right. Yeah. What is the most inspirational or important book you've ever read?
Unbroken, about Louis Zamperini. I was in prison. I read this guy's story, and it made me realize that if there was any point that I ever felt like the victim, or I felt like I deserved something or couldn't overcome something, I would look at that and see the inspiration around him and that wonderful writing. That book for me over time, I've moved on, moved to different homes. That book, no matter what, has always maintained in my library.
Extraordinary true story, Laura Hillebrand. It's an incredible book, no doubt. All right, the movie, whether it's 15 minutes left or just started, that when you see it, you're in.
The Dark Knight. It's the performance by Heath Ledger.
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan's adaptation of Batman. That it doesn't matter. I'm locked in. And sometimes my brother's an actor too, and so he told me one time after I'd seen it a few times in the theater, he said, "Go to the theater and don't watch anything but Heath. Don't watch anything else. Just watch him." And when you do that, and I was locked into that, I was like, "What an unbelievable performance!" So yeah, the Dark Knight for me is the best movie that I've ever seen.
All right, last thing, you're a big sports fan. The sporting event you've never been to and want to attend.
Well, it was the Masters, and ironically enough, you probably understand how difficult this is, but everybody puts in the lottery every year.
Yeah.
The first 3 years out of prison, I hit the lottery. It is absolutely karma. They were like, the Masters people must have been like, "Oh man, Ryan's wanting tickets. I mean, he's had a tough go of it. Let's let him and his family come down to Augusta." So that was the
that was the Holy Grail.
That was the Holy Grail. I got to experience that. I don't know what would be next. I've got to experience pretty much everything in terms of the sporting world. But the Masters and Augusta National were certainly it. I think probably the next bucket list thing would be there, and I'll kind of maybe point to my buddy Peyton Manning, who's a member at Augusta.
Yes, he is.
That would be the next bucket list. I need to play Augusta National.
You do indeed. Listen, I'm awfully appreciative of the time. Very happy for you with this platform and obviously calling a game you love. But most importantly, appreciate the inspiration and your willingness to give it away, to keep it yourself. So thanks for doing this.
Gary, thank you. I appreciate it. Keep it up. Proud of you. Everybody who can take something from this is important. If we affect one life, you've made a difference. So thanks.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate Ryan Leib taking the time. And I know that this was a total departure from the conversations I have on a week-to-week basis, but it was important to me. And I appreciate your indulgence if you did take the time to listen, because it's important for me, because I've got to give it away. I've got to give away the things that I know. And all I know is my own journey. And I am not an expert on anything. I'm just an alcoholic who's trying to stay sober one day at a time. And Ryan doing the same thing. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this Five Clubs conversation. We'll see you next time.